starting. Okay. I think we're live, but I never really know until I get some confirmation from the chat. So you guys let me know. Well, I guess if you can't hear me, you won't be able to. Anyway, who do we have here today? Mr. Nutrition Science Watchdog. Or should I call you the cholesterol myth crusher? Wow, the vegan assassin, the veg start destroyer, soy boy slayer, a man of many names.
That works.
Bald man bat himself, none other than Bart Kay. It's been a long time coming, man. What's been happening? Why haven't we been able to make this happen for so long? What's the problem?
Look, you and I, Carneval, have been talking about doing this for months on end, and it just hasn't come together. There's no particular reason. It just, it didn't work out for time-wise for a number of different reasons at various, we both got busy, both our channels grew, so it's just one of those things that we've always said, hey, yes, absolutely, we need to do this. And it just hasn't come together until now. And I'm just so chuffed that it has come together, because I've been wanting to talk to you for forever, my man. Forever.
Yeah, likewise. I'm glad we're finally here. Yeah, I think it's mostly been the time difference and figuring all that stuff out. I mean, you're living tomorrow. I'm yesterday for you, or something along those lines. Yes. I don't know.
We're cutting edge here in New
That's
Zealand.
obviously assuming that we live on a planet, not a flat
Earth.
Yes.
So. What's your view on that one?
I abstain. I think it's a ball. I tend to believe it's a ball, but hey, maybe I was brainwashed to believe that. However, whenever I've gone up there in a plane, and it's been a few times, it kind of has that ball shape to it. So I'll go with that. How about you?
Yeah, I tend to believe it's an oblate spheroid. In other words, a ball with slightly squashed top and slightly broader around the equator. I buy it.
Does it matter?
Not really. Not in terms of what we should eat and not eat, and
Yeah, nutrition. I mean that's why we're here, I suppose.
Yeah,
we're not here to talk about all that silly stuff. Forgive me for bringing it up. Hey, I had a question for you because of something you said on Drew Morg's channel.
Okay,
is it true that you used to see dead people?
Yeah. Not in the Sixth Sense way, not in the I see ghosts. One of the many tasks I had when I was working at the University of Auckland between about 2008 and about 2011 or so was I had a number of lectures, I guess, or teaching sessions that I would have to give to students in the cadaver lab. So at the University of Auckland, there was a lab that was based at the hospital, which was attached to the university campus in town there. And you'd just go into this lab, and there'd be a bunch of gurneys there with a bunch of bags on the tables, and you zip, open up. Okay, what have we got here? Dive in, pull out the guts, have a look. For those that don't know what that is, a cadaver is a person who has died and left their body to science, so that mad scientists like myself can basically pull out their workings and show a bunch of students, hey, look, here's a heart, here's some lungs, here's some intestines, here's a diverticuli, that kind of thing. So
what was that like?
It's humbling that a person would be so giving as to say, look, I don't need the use of my body any longer. I am no more. If it can be used to help somebody after the time of my death, that's great. It can be an emotional thing. It can bring up, especially for students who are not used to it, it can bring up feelings around, I lost my grandma last year or whatever it is. So you sometimes have to deal with inexplicably suddenly upset students who, are claiming I want to be a doctor and yet can't handle a dead body on a table. It weeds them out,
Of
actually,
course.
to be fair. It does weed them out a little bit. It's an amazing experience, to be fair.
I'm familiar with, yeah. I could only speak about it. It's not the same, obviously, because it's animals, but I have some experience with animals like that, and that in and of itself is a little weird at first. So I can't even imagine what it's like to, open up a dead person and deal with that. I was just curious, really. It's kind of, I don't know.
You've done it,
I don't know. I could imagine people flipping out.
Yeah, it does happen. But I mean, once you've done it a few times, it's just like you learn to consider that person at that time as the model. This is the model. This is the teaching resource. And you don't at that time think about that person as a person. Obviously, you treat them with respect. It's not a place for joking and laughing around. It's a very serious time. It's about, it's a very somber thing. You're learning from someone who has given their earthly remains behind, I guess. And so, yeah, but it's fine. Once you've done it a few times, it's fine. Yeah, it's just one of those things.
Right on. I did a piss poor attempt a few minutes ago of introducing you, clowning around a little bit, but maybe you could tell us, I'm sure most of my subscribers are probably familiar with you, but maybe you could tell us, why are you here in YouTube, what your mission is, what it is that Bart Kay is about, so on and so forth. Break it down for us, just in case somebody is not familiar with you.
Yeah, okay, no, fair enough. I mean, and firstly, I don't mind the joking around at all. I do like to keep things light. Those of you that have just tuned in from my live stream, just previous to this chat, you'll see that there was a lot of levity, there was a lot of laughter that went on there. That was, it was all good fun, because I want to keep it, accessible to people and fun. But my mission, and you've got it right there, it is an absolute mission. I'm absolutely driven. I am here to stamp out the misinformation, the nonsense, the pseudoscience, the people who want to come online and claim authority and then say things that are completely scientifically contraindicated, untrue, nonsense, bullshit, however you want to phrase it. And really, I do that just by offering...
I like bullshit.
Yeah, bullshit's good, and I do that by offering, to the best of my knowledge, such that it is the objective truth as we understand it, with the best use of the tools that we have to hand, the science that we have. For those that don't know, my background is in science. I am a former senior lecturer in exercise physiology, cardiovascular physiology and pathophysiology. I've got a fairly extensive list of publications of research that I've undertaken myself. I've got about 17 years teaching experience in the university setting. I've undertaken some sort of high-level, multi-million-dollar external consultancies with various organizations to help them optimize what it is they do, and that's kind of my background. At about the end of September 2016, I decided I'd had a guts full of that, and I was going to go and be self-employed and be a YouTuber and try and educate people, because academia, throughout the entire time I was there, was working against me, purely because I was a very serious threat to what they were doing, and what they were trying to do was to put forward or espouse a dogma, a belief structure that they were trying to pass on to the next generation, and it was fundamentally flawed from the ground up. And so I was prepared to get up on my hind legs and say, no, I'm not teaching that to students. No, I'm not saying that. No, that's not okay. And so obviously, that's not straight out of How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so, while I did that for 17 years, it was hard work for that reason. And so, I kind of had a bit of a breakdown, I guess, at the end of it. I thought, this this is killing me actually. So I'm going to go and do my own thing. So I did. I was in the UK at the time. I left the UK because that was also killing me. I came home to beautiful New Zealand, where I now live and thrive and survive down here on the west coast of the South Island. I live in a small town basically at the back of bumfuck. So, you know, there's not too many people. That's great. You know, after this, I'm going to go and start building a chicken coop because, you know, we need to put some chickens in, and we've got room to run some goats and some sheep probably. And, you know, we've got a 100-year-old wooden house that needs some serious renovating and bringing up to speed and insulating against the winter and stuff. And so, you know, I'm just loving it. So I'm doing my own thing. You know, I gave up $80,000 to $100,000 a year to be a senior academic, to sort of, you know, struggle, as I'm sure you understand, Carney, being one yourself, as a YouTube creator. You know, I don't know what you people think we get paid for doing this, but it's not 80 to 100,000 a year, I can promise, at this stage anyway. You know, and that's a lifestyle choice.
I mean,
yeah,
this is just mostly fun for me. Sometimes it's a lot of aggravation too, but mostly fun, I guess. Yeah, it's definitely, unless you're Freely the Banana Girl, you're not going to be rolling in the dough, that's for sure. Unless you're telling people exactly what they want to hear, it's not going to happen. Well, I mean, I can't say that. I mean, maybe the tide is shifting. I don't know. But so what was and you understand, Bart, it seems like we have a bit of a delay, being that you're on the other side of this flat earth. It takes a couple of seconds for whatever I say to get to you. Okay, so sometimes I feel like I'm talking over you. I don't mean to be. Anyway, so I mean, I think most people could understand. We know what the dogma tends to be, right? High carb, low fat, whatever the version of that sort of diet, that, you know, that seems to be the dogma all over the world. I'm guessing that's basically what you were running into. What is it specifically that you're talking about that you had a problem with in the science world? What is it that they were teaching that you disagreed with?
Yeah, okay. So the issues for me are that the idea that we should avoid saturated fat, animal fat, as being somehow a cause of obesity, diabetes, heart disease. It doesn't do any of those things. That's false. There is no science to support that whatsoever. The idea that instead of consuming animal fats, we should base our diet on 65% or more complex carbohydrates, whole grains, that kind of thing. That's just nonsense. That's absolutely biologically, physiologically contraindicated for human beings. That leads us to the exact problems that the avoidance of the saturated fat was supposed to get to. In other words, grains cause obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and all those kind of issues. It doesn't solve that. It causes it. The idea that animal protein is bad for us and causes cancer, you know, nonsense, absolute nonsense. Basically, anything that the Western dietetics associations will tell you in terms of what is a healthy diet, what is a good thing to do as a human being, wrong. All of it, completely arse about face, just destitute of any kind of science at all. And so my thing was to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong.
So, Bart, what's wrong with carbs? Why are carbs bad?
Okay. It's a very sweeping term to say carbs are bad. Okay. People need to understand that we need some sugar in our blood. Our brains have to have sugar to run on. Our brains will not run, otherwise we will die. But what we don't understand, what most people don't understand, is that our bodies are capable of manufacturing all the carbohydrates that they need from non-carbohydrate sources in the diet. We don't have to consume carbohydrates to have carbohydrates. And as it turns out, basing our
Fat
diet,
and protein.
fat and protein, through a process called gluconeogenesis. Basically, our bodies will transmute fat and proteins into sugar as required, no problem at all. Our metabolic processes are
And
very,
this
very
is
efficient.
demand driven.
Yeah, absolutely. Demand driven
This is demand
phenomenon.
driven from what I understand. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yes, it is.
Okay.
So when you need sugar, your body will make it. Simple as. That's not an issue. If we eat a lot of sugar, sure, that subserves our really quite small need for sugar, actually. We don't need a lot of sugar. And that saves our body having to manufacture it from fats and proteins, sure. But what we actually do in our modern Western diet association approved diets is we pile in carbs after carbs after carbs after carbs. And what those associations also tell us is that we should have a balanced macronutrient diet, which means we should have, sort of 15% protein as well. And we should have sort of, maybe 5 to 7% of our intakes as fats as well. And we should have, certain sorts of fats that aren't animal fats. And all of those things put together cause a chain of events metabolically whereby we become insulin resistant, meaning our bodies are unable to actually get the sugar from our bloodstream out of our bloodstream and into our cells where it's needed to do work. So our blood sugar becomes chronically, constantly elevated above the level that it needs. And sugar in our blood is one of the most toxic things that we can do to our bodies long term, short of something that will kill us stone dead in a few minutes.
So how do you see these macronutrient ratios? What, in your opinion, should these be? Intakes, obviously.
For me, what seems quite ideal for most people in terms of metabolically, physiologically, is in terms of your caloric intake, it's around about 50-50 fat and protein. And by protein, I mean animal flesh. And by fat, I mean animal fat. As close to 50-50 as you can get. In other words, what I espouse and suggest to people about diet is no carbs of any kind at all. 0 carbs in your diet. I also
none
suggest
whatsoever.
none at all. Okay. Now, in practice, we're all human beings. I am too. I have the odd carb here and there, absolutely. But on any given day, if I'm following and being adherent, it's animal flesh and attendant animal fat. That's what I would eat, basically. So I go on.
So what are the problems with consuming some carbs? Because a lot of people like to espouse low carb, high fat. You're more in the camp of 0 carb, I suppose. But let's say for athletic performance or just a regular person, I mean, first and foremost, are there some instances where you would, like in an athlete's case, where you would say, okay, some carbs are fine because you're going to burn them off or for whatever reason? And what is the problem with eating lots of fat and carbs mechanistically? If you know, what is it that's bad for us, detrimental to our health when you ingest quite a bit of both?
Okay, so the issue at play here is the workings of a part of our metabolic system called the Randle Cycle. To put it in the simplest terms I can, I don't want to get too technical, but basically what it says is that your body is capable of oxidizing fats. It's also capable of oxidizing carbohydrates. As a third option, only in severe emergencies, it will oxidize proteins. So the usual run-of-the-mill everyday choice is either fats or carbohydrates. It cannot do both at once. There is a whole metabolic machinery that has to swing one way or the other to move from this gear to that gear. So if you consume a high-fat zero carb diet, you're fine in terms of its effect on your insulin status and your inflammation status. If you eat a high carb, zero fat or close to zero fat diet, same deal. You're actually okay in terms of insulin. You're okay in terms of inflammation at that time. That is why people that go on a vegan diet for the first 3 to 5 years will go, oh, look, it reversed my heart disease. It reversed my inflammation. How can you say this is not the healthiest diet in existence, et cetera, et cetera? To which I say to those people, come back to me in another 3 years and tell me you're still doing well health-wise. You won't be, probably, because if you are, you're an outlier, because mostly it's because it's a deficient diet. You're going to be in trouble. But the real issue is...
So I'm guessing fat-soluble vitamins are the problem here. Fat-soluble vitamins become a problem eventually.
Yeah,
the lack thereof.
Yes, largely that's
okay.
it. Yeah. And a few other things, like actually plants contain anti-nutrients to stop you absorbing all the minerals and things that they contain. Why do they do that? Because they want to discourage you from eating them for food. That's why they do that. There are also naturally occurring pesticides in plants, again, because plants don't actually want to be eaten. They're not here to subserve the human need for food. Animals can fly, swim, run, crawl away from you, try and escape you when you're hunting them down for food. Plants can't do that. They're rooted to the spot, so they need other means to discourage you from eating them, and they indulge in chemical warfare very, very effectively, actually, as it turns out. And so that's basically what goes on with that. The issue with the Randle cycle is if you take in carbohydrates and fats, in other words, you have a healthy, balanced macronutrient diet, what you're actually doing is blocking your ability to absorb and use either the fats or the carbohydrates for energy. You are starving your cells of fuel. And all the fuel that you take in then gets funneled into fat storage. How does that happen? It happens by a mechanism where your body, number one, becomes inflamed. And it is that inflammation, which is a phosphorylation-based artifact, that basically turns off the transporters that allows you to get fats and carbohydrates into your cells and funnels it all towards storage in your adipose tissue, your fat cells. So you now become inflamed and you are insulin resistant because you mixed up your macronutrients. So that's if somebody says to me, what is the cause of our modern epidemics of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, Parkinson's disease, etc., 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 a lot of people would expect that I would say the problem is carbohydrates in the diet. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the problem is mixing carbs and fats. You have two choices. If you want to be healthy, you can have a fat-based diet with as close to zero carb as possible, or you can go the other way and have a high carb diet with as close to zero fat as possible. Both of those things will alleviate the fatness, obesity, insulinogenic response thing, but one of those diets is deficient and will kill you in about 5 years, and one of them is not deficient and will lead you to a long and healthy life.
Are you familiar with the Ketavans and what would I think you'd have to consider a paradox in this context that you just presented? Have you heard of this population?
Yeah, it's one of those blue zone ones.
So basically, to explain to the chat, in case people aren't familiar, these are indigenous people somewhere in South America, Papua New Guinea, I believe, I'm not sure, who reportedly eat a lot of, they eat exactly the kind of diet that you say they shouldn't be eating. They're eating quite a bit of carbs and a lot of saturated fat from animal foods, as well as lots of coconut. So they're eating obviously whole food plant-based diet, but they don't seem to have the same rates, or if any rates, of chronic disease. Do you know anything about that, or why that might be? Is it like genetic differences, or?
Yeah, I think that there are genetic differences between populations. There are some populations who can get away with self-abuse more readily than other populations. If a population of people eat a certain way for enough generations, then there can be a genetic drift and a genetic selection towards being more adept at dealing with that particular situation. I think also that it's very important to understand the interaction between diet, lifestyle, exercise, workloads, and indeed non-native EMF, cell phones, radio signals, that kind of stuff that we Westerners are subject to, that some of these native people are subject to a lot less. And I think that there are very, very important synergies there in terms of direct effects on mitochondrial function, for example.
So our metabolisms are impaired?
By
Are our
EMF.
metabolisms impaired by all these other? Okay.
Yeah, I think they are,
because
definitely.
a lot of people seem to have issues getting into ketosis, for example. I mean, going from being a sugar burner for 20, 30, 40 years, people try to ketogenic diet and they think that they're in ketosis, but they don't necessarily attain that goal. Is that also why, perhaps because their metabolism is just wrecked?
Yeah, there is a bit of that, and also I'm glad you mentioned ketosis, actually, because I'm going to be posting a video later in the week, which will be a very deep dive into the whole area of ketogenesis, ketosis, and stuff. And I'm actually going to be talking as part of that discussion about the Inuit who live above the Arctic Circle, whose native diet for generations until recently was basically seal meat and blubber, whale meat and blubber, fish, no carbs at all, that sort of thing. And as it turns out, their population, they have up to an 80% prevalence of a genetic mutation that actually blockades them from getting into ketosis at all. Well, it knocks down their ability by 80% to be accurate about it. So a lot of people, like there's one guy called Chris Masterjohn, you've probably heard of, who suggests that, the reason for that is because ketosis leads to acidosis, and that's a problem if you're going to be in ketosis all the time because you're not eating any carbs, sort of thing. Chris is wrong. He's completely wrong about that. That's absolute nonsense from his part, and I intend to have him on about that at some point. To sort of preempt just this little bit of the talk, basically what it boils down to for me is that when you have ketones in your blood, that is like a second messenger hormone type communication between the cells of your body and your brain. What the ketones actually do is they tell your brain to actually turn down your metabolic rate, turn down your appetite, because you're not getting enough energy. And so what we need to do is conserve resources, and it slows everything down, turns everything down, and that can become a bad thing if you're in ketosis all the time. So what I suggest to people is it's very, very important to understand that being in ketosis is not the goal of a ketogenic diet. It is an acute consequence of eating a nutritionally indicated diet. Okay, so to say I want to be in ketosis, am I in ketosis? Pee on the strip, see what color it goes. Fucking pointless. There is some minor evidence, emergent evidence here and there that ketones in and of themselves might be beneficial in terms of an anti-inflammatory effect, for example, and a few other minor things. But actually, otherwise, ketones are just a substrate for oxidation. And in fact, in full-blown ketogenesis, you're still only subserving around about 15% of your brain's energetic requirements as ketones. The rest is still sugar, as generated by gluconeogenesis
Don't
from the fat.
Because I've heard that fat burners, people on a ketogenic diet who also produce some ketones, the main source of their energy are triglycerides. Is this correct?
Correct. Yeah. So triglycerides.
Where does your energy come from? Okay.
Well, in that kind of diet, the triglycerides are the main source of energy. What happens is the triglycerides are broken down by a process called beta oxidation to a substance called acetyl coenzyme A, and then several acetyl coenzyme A's are chemically bonded together. A few other bits and bobs are spat off out in the strange direction, and you get some ketone bodies. So ketone bodies can then be used to be transmuted back into acetyl coenzyme A. And for those who don't know, acetyl coenzyme A is the first intermediary of the tricarboxylic acid, TCA, or Krebs cycle, your energy producing cycle in your cells. And so your brain can run on ketones, or it can run on glucose, which is generated directly from triglycerides via gluconeogenesis. Your liver takes care of both of those things. And it's your liver that basically maintains your blood glucose level in the face of not consuming any glucose in your diet. Or indeed, if you eat too many carbs in your diet, then your liver is involved in building up triglycerides for fat storage. So really, it's your liver that's controlling that situation. So the really important thing for
I had a question.
Go.
Sorry, this delay sucks. I wanted, because you were talking about blood glucose levels, so I wanted to ask you. I was monitoring my blood glucose for a while when I was eating zero carb. I wasn't eating any carbohydrate whatsoever, a good amount of protein. And before I would wake up, technically, and like, you know that moment when you're kind of waking up, but you're not quite awake, I would set an alarm to wake up before I'm supposed to wake up, and I would do my blood glucose test, and I was at about 80. And then when I was fully awakened, it would go all the way up to like 92, 96. I wasn't ingesting any carbs. And a lot of people suggested, when I got a blood test, fasted blood test, my blood sugar level was 96. And a lot of people suggested that those are diabetic numbers. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not eating any sugar. My body is producing this sugar from protein, presumably, maybe fat. If this is a demand-driven sort of thing, then why would I worry about my blood glucose level being too high? Should I? What do you think?
If your blood glucose is elevated,
now, I understand you're not a doctor.
Yeah, sure.
I understand you're not a doctor. I'm not, like, let's just make that clear. Yeah, but yeah, your opinion,
okay.
Please.
So basically, the information is that if your blood glucose is elevated to that sort of level, up around 100 all the time, that's a problem. What you're talking about there is a thing that's called the morning phenomenon. You can probably do a Google on that. Basically, when you are first waking up, when your body first experiences, it's actually light that does it. It's morning light. That tells your body that it's morning time, it's time for you to wake up, it's time for you you're going to need a little bit of extra energy to get things started, to kickstart a few things. Suddenly you're going to have to be thinking about surviving your environment. There's going to be some challenges, etc., etc. So your body preemptively goes, right, we're going to need some sugar, and it dumps a bunch of sugar into your blood. It's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. It's nothing to be concerned about whatsoever, because throughout the rest of the day, your blood sugar will normalize, and actually quite quickly. Once you get moving in the morning, that morning spike will drop away quite quickly, and that sugar will be used to get your brain going, to get a few of your organs going that have been shut down overnight, and et cetera, et cetera. Most notably, muscle function and that kind of things. So, yeah, not a problem at all. If your blood glucose was 100 all the time, then yeah, that'd be a problem.
Without ingesting any carbs.
As I say, you don't need to ingest any carbs to get that to happen.
Right, that's gluconeogenesis, obviously. I was going to ask you, since we're talking blood tests, do you get like lipid panels at all? Do you care? Are you into that stuff at all? Do you look at people's blood markers? None of that is important to you. How come?
I can look at people's blood markers if they want me to. I can comment on them, absolutely. At the end of the day, what people need to understand is that you have a bunch of DNA in the nucleus of every single cell of your body, and that DNA makes up a bunch of things called genes, and genes control the production of various proteins. And genes can be turned on or turned off by their environment. They're quite reactive. They're quite clever, actually. Now, these genes that you have are the result of surviving at least 3.8 thousand million years of natural selection. These genes know exactly what they are doing. The level of proteins in your blood, including the things that they call cholesterol, which are actually not cholesterol, they are phospholipoproteins, actually, or sometimes just called lipids for short. They're not even lipids. They are largely, fat and protein molecules that contain things like cholesterol and triglycerides and whatever. Anyway, your body generates and makes these things according to requirements, according to your genes that have been around a lot longer than some clown in a white coat with a stethoscope around his or her neck telling you that this stuff will kill you. You mean the stuff that my body is generating because it's done so for, that long? Crazy. It's ridiculous.
All right, well, maybe just for the hell of it, we could, I have my blood test here in front of me.
Cool.
My lipid panel. Maybe I could give you some markers and you could tell me what you think.
All right.
This is, again, for the record, this is very low carb, very high fat, 90% animal-based diet, I would say. Anyway,
awesome.
My total cholesterol was 291. I don't know if you care about that marker at all. Because, any standard Western doctor anywhere in the world would probably want to put me on the statin, having cholesterol 291, probably.
They would. Yeah, they would.
Okay.
Do you want to deal with each of these parameters individually, or do you want an overall comment at the end of a list of parameters?
I'll read them out to you, and if you want me to repeat any individual one, you let me know. But I'll just give you the numbers, and I'll let you say whatever. Okay. So total cholesterol, once again, 291. Triglycerides, 41. HDL, 72, which leaves LDL of around 200.
Right. Okay.
When am I going to get a heart attack?
Well, you should already be dead, shouldn't you? Yeah, look, basically,
disappointing.
The thing is, there is an idea in the medical fraternity that, well, originally there was an idea that total cholesterol was a valid marker for the ability to predict cardiovascular pathology, heart disease, if you like. It turns out that total cholesterol is not a good marker at all, actually. And so what they did in recent years is said, yes, well, it's not the total cholesterol that's the issue here. It's that fraction of the cholesterol that is the low-density lipoprotein fraction that's the problem. That's the thing that's causing heart disease, they said, even though they produced no evidence whatsoever for that argument. There is no mechanistic data that says that's the case. However, we're going to do an associative thing here, and we're going to go, yes, we're going to associate this with that. We're going to draw a graph, put some dots on it, draw a line through it, and say that's what the issue is, and really not much better than that in terms of the evidence. Then we're going to create a drug which interferes with your ability to synthesize that particular protein, and then we're going to aggressively market that drug for about 50 years. We're going to mandate physicians to hold and espouse a certain idea about it. We're going to give them lots of good kickbacks to write lots of prescriptions for this drug. We're going to basically buy off the scientific fraternity and get them to tell us what we want to hear, which is that this drug is a great thing and will save lives. None of it's true, actually. Low-density lipoprotein does not cause heart disease. Taking a statin medication will not have any effect on your life expectancy, heart disease risk, or anything else, actually. In fact, what the drug will do is slowly kill you because it is a dangerous contraindicated poison and not a valid medication under any circumstances for any human being ever. basically. So that's how that basically boils down. So this whole idea of taking your blood lipids, doing a test and telling you, this number's too high, this one's too low, this one's not good enough, this one's a risk factor, etc., etc. It's all absolute nonsense from start to finish. Your blood, what they call blood lipids, the levels in your blood are exactly what they should be. How do I know that? Because you have genes that encode for the manufacture of this stuff. And as I say, those genes have been around for 3,800 million years. Okay, they know what they're doing. These genes have this sorted out.
So I understand that there's no, at the very least, no proof of cholesterol having a causal role in heart disease. But be that as it may, do you still think that some of these are good markers? In other words, not the cause of the disease, but maybe perhaps a symptom of it?
Potentially,
like certain ratios.
Yeah. Okay, so potentially.
Yeah, I'm talking about specifically like.
Go on.
Sorry, this delay is killing us. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're probably referring to the HDL, LDL ratio, the triglyceride ratio, all those kind of ratios that you can get. And the answer is that some of those are better predictors of heart disease outcome than strictly total cholesterol or indeed LDL cholesterol. But nonetheless, even they're not great. They're better, but they're still not great. Mm-hmm. And even if they were great, which they're not, they are still not an indication of cause and effect. So in other words, to interfere pharmacologically with a ratio on the basis that it correlates to an outcome does not guarantee a result to the outcome, because there is no causal artifact there. It's fallacious. It's an erroneous idea that messing about with your body's naturally occurring ability to generate and maintain concentrations of various phospholipoproteins in the blood is going to have a good outcome. It's not going to have a good outcome. It's pseudoscience of the highest order. It's nonsense.
Okay, question. So could there be a reason, let's say inflammation in the body for whatever reason, smoking or what have you, that necessitates or upticks the production of cholesterol, which is why you have higher cholesterol, but at the same time you're also more likely for heart disease, likely to get heart disease, but it's not because the cholesterol is elevated, it's because you're inflamed. So the inflammation increases cholesterol, which from what I understand will fight certain types of inflammation in the body. So that's why I say, well, maybe it's a good marker, but definitely not something that we can say causes the problem in the first place.
Yeah.
Am I getting this correct?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way of putting it. I think that's a nice, probably quite accessible way of putting it for people that perhaps don't have scientific training or medical training or whatever. Another way of looking at it would be to say, look, okay, every single time anywhere in the developed world, every single time you see a forest fire, pretty soon after that, if you go and have a look, you will find fire crews at those forest fires. Okay. That being the case, what we need to do in order to prevent forest fires is dissolve fire crews, stop training fire crews, prevent fire engines from being manufactured, tell the firemen to go home, find other jobs, whatever, prevent those fire crews from showing up to those fires. And that will solve the forest fire issue.
This is the logic. So this is the logic behind statins. Logic in quotation marks. Okay.
Correct. Exactly.
All right. Now, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that to muddy the waters up on statins, of course, there's always muddying of the waters. There is a serendipitous, unplanned effect of statin medications that the makers never thought of. They never planned for it. But actually, statins do have an anti-inflammatory effect. So,
By accident.
by accident, correct. And so statins do have an effect on, for example, heart disease outcomes in certain populations of individuals. And that's the thing that they use to argue, see, look, it works, they say. Until you look at the statistics for all-cause mortality in the same populations. In other words, two populations of people who are otherwise indistinguishable in terms of the characteristics of the population pool, the ones on statins and the ones not on statins, the ones on statins actually don't live a single day longer because they die for a whole bunch of other reasons. So while the drug stops them from having a heart attack, maybe because of anti-inflammatory effect, nothing to do with cholesterol, actually, the knocking down of the cholesterol then ends up with that person dying for another reason related to the cholesterol being knocked down. So in other words, there is no benefit.
That's one problem I have with vegans quoting a lot of these studies. You know, they'll look at heart attacks or atherosclerosis. You know, they very rarely produce studies that look at all-cause mortality. And, you know, it could be said that perhaps people who eat a lot of meat or whatever do happen to die of heart attacks more so than people who eat, let's say, a plant-based diet. But if these plant-based dieters, I'm not saying this is true, obviously, but if these plant-based dieters, even though they might not die of heart attack, that could be because something else takes them out earlier, right?
Yeah. So if you look at, I mean, and I'm not a fan of epidemiology at all in terms of its ability to explain things mechanistically, because it can't. You can look at the coincidence between this and that. That is the role of epidemiology. And if you look at that stuff, what you'll find is that persons who undertake either vegetarian or vegan lifestyles do not live longer than people who undertake diets of largely meat-based or animal-based. There is no data concerning carnivores per se to look at, but if you look at standard diet versus vegetarian versus vegan, there's no differences in terms of lifespan.
Yeah. Question. So what, in your opinion, causes heart disease, and is it multifactorial?
Yeah, it is, but at its root cause, the most simple explanation is the one that says, okay, it's multifactorial because there are many causes of inflammation, but it's monofactorial in that every single time you have heart disease, it is because of systemic chronic inflammation. So bad diet
what causes inflammation?
Okay. Bad diet causes inflammation. What's a bad diet? A bad diet is one that's based on plants. That is a bad diet. That is a pro-inflammatory diet. That is a diet that will lead you at some point to heart disease. If you add in fat to plant materials as well, then you'll activate that Randle Cycle issue, and that will bring that whole time frame of the heart disease, etc., forward still further. That's a very bad diet. If you carry too much weight on your person, if you're a fatty, in other words, then you will have almost certainly elevated blood pressure. Elevated blood pressure causes physical damage to the walls of the arteries, thus leading to inflammation, thus leading to heart disease. There are various things in, for example, plants that are poisonous to humans that will cause inflammation and cause heart disease. Getting your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio out of whack will cause inflammation. How do you do that? Well, you take in lots of mono and polyunsaturated healthy heart oils, the ones that have the heart foundation tick on them. They will kill you, boys and girls. Sorry to tell you the truth, but there you go. environmental factors, environmental toxins, pollution in the world are all bad things. There are various
Smoking,
obviously, that's a real bad one. There are various
alcohol.
alcohol's not so good either. That's pretty pro-inflammatory. Yep. And then there are various pathological infection type things that have been implicated as well. Certainly, one of the big ones, actually, pro-inflammatory effect is having chronically elevated blood glucose. You know, there's another class cause of heart disease. Basically, yeah, it's the exact opposite of what they will tell you. And what they will tell you is that the cause of heart disease is elevated cholesterol, and that the way to get elevated cholesterol is to consume a diet that is rich in saturated fats. You know,
Question.
both of those are wrong. Both of those decisions. Yes, Christian.
So this inflammation that you speak of has to be in your cardiovascular system, I'm assuming, or just anywhere in the body. For example, you could have inflammation from an injury or some kind of chronic physical problem. Does that contribute to the same type of inflammation, or is that completely separate and would not necessarily contribute to, let's say, atherosclerosis, heart disease?
Yeah, the second one. I mean, you'd need if you're talking about atherosclerosis, heart disease, what we're talking about is chronic inflammation of the tissues lining the arteries. Basically, you're not going to get heart disease from having a bad knee, for example.
Right. Which is also inflammation. It's just
yeah.
Okay, I understand. There's a question in the chat. Have you heard of research that shows that cancer is more of a metabolic disease and a high-carb diet contributes to it?
Yeah, I have heard that argument. There are a couple of schools of thought on cancer, one of which is the metabolic school of thought, and the other one is the genetic school of thought. I think that cancer is a multifactorial disease process which involves both the genes and the interaction of those genes with the environment in which they find themselves, which includes the diet, but also, you know, the environmental, you know, situation as well. Cancer, again, I mean, people talk about cancer as if it is a single disease. It's not. It's hundreds and hundreds of different disease processes which are lumped together under an umbrella term, an umbrella label that they call cancer. Basically, you can't make sweeping generalizations about cancer because cancer comes in so many different guises, so many different forms. Basically, what it is, to all intents and purposes, is uncontrolled continuous cell division, which is abnormal. One of the most typical mechanisms of derangement in the cells that are dividing in an uncontrolled way is the fact that they become much more reliant on carbohydrate as a fuel source. They turn off their fat oxidizing processes. They disable the inbuilt mitochondrial self-destruct mechanism in a cell. So in as much of that, there is an idea out there that if you starve the cells of glucose, then you will stop the cells from dividing because they are now reliant upon said glucose. The only problem with that in the human body is gluconeogenesis. You don't need to consume any carbohydrates to have carbohydrates available in your blood because your body will put them there. So the only way to kill cancer cells would be to block off their ability completely to use glucose, which you can do using dichloroacetate. But you don't want to get that wrong because you'll die.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, let's not talk about stuff like that. Question, because I've heard you state on multiple occasions that a whole food plant-based diet can reverse atherosclerosis. Are you familiar with this research? 1, 2, how good is this research? And if you have any other comments as to perhaps what the mechanisms there are, what is happening there, if you know.
Okay, yeah, it's straightforward. Basically, the cause of atherosclerosis is chronic systemic inflammation. What I spoke about earlier with the Randle Cycle idea, when you mix carbs and fats together in the diet, is that both carbs and fats are blockaded. They are channeled towards fat storage. Now, what this is akin to is the way that our ancestors ate during the fall time. The fall time was when fats and carbohydrates were available to us in our diets at the same time. Animals were scurrying around getting ready for winter, and the fruits and things, the sugary things, the tubers and things were ready to consume at that time of the year. That tells our body it's fall time and we need to store fat for the winter. So what we're going to do is stop your body from using all this energy, turn your metabolism down so that we can get you some fat stored on ready for the winter time. And the message that tells our body that now it's full time is the fact that we've mixed fats and carbohydrates together, basically. And then obviously we'd go through the winter and we'd live on our stored fats pretty much. And then, summertime would come around and it'll be fine, and we'd be cycling in and out of this metabolic Randle cycle pathway. Unfortunately, nowadays, we have supermarkets down the road, most of us. We can go and buy fats and carbohydrates together, and in fact, that's what the Association of Dietetics will tell us we should be doing. That's nice and healthy, they'll say. Go and do that. Have a nice, healthy, balanced diet. Mix up your fats and your carbs together there. That'll be great for you, they tell you. And what it leads us to is a situation where we are chronically in a situation where we're in fat storage mode. That's why we get fatter and fatter and fatter every year, basically, because we're not having that break from that cycle where our bodies can then switch gears and do what they're supposed to in the way that nature designed. When you blockade a cell from getting energy in, because you've blockaded both fats and carbohydrates, what happens is the redox potential in the cell, in the mitochondria in the cell, drops. It drops because the energy that's required to keep that cellular redox potential up is now no longer available. So the redox potential drops. The direct result of that is that there is an increased concentration of inorganic free phosphate in the cell cytosol. That free phosphate binds to a bunch of proteins called pro-inflammatory cytokines. When you bind a phosphate to a pro-inflammatory cytokine, that tells that pro-inflammatory cytokine to turn on and to set up inflammation. Boof. So when you're in fat storage mode, you are inflamed, necessarily. Inflammation is a good thing in the acute way, but not chronically.
It's right. It's chronic inflammation that's a problem. So could it be that, and I know there aren't really any studies on this, could, let's say, a carnivore diet, high fat, zero carb diet, could it also reverse heart disease? Theoretically, obviously, would that be a fair hypothesis?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm hypothesizing. That's exactly what I've been arguing for months and months, as long as I've been a YouTube personality of any note. What I'm saying is, yes, the research clearly shows that when you take the fat out of the diet, the heart disease regresses. I'm not arguing with that research. It's good research. It does show that, absolutely. There is not yet research that says, and if you take the carb out and leave the fat behind, the same thing will happen, because the problem isn't the fats, the problem isn't the carbs, the problem is the mixture of the two. So take either one out and you will solve that problem. So when the research catches up and the research is done, that is what the research will show. It will show that a carnivorous diet reverses heart disease just as well, if not better, than a plant-based diet does. It will show that. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. And then we come back to the same argument.
Yeah, that would seem to make sense.
And so my argument that I come back to is this. Okay, yeah. You have a choice, take out fats or take out carbohydrates. Have a look at which of those diets is deficient. One of them is and one of them's not. That makes your choice for you.
Right. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we all know that the plant-based diet is ideologically based first and foremost. So it's not, it was never about health. So let's not even trip about that. But my question to you is, why are all these vegans so afraid to talk to you? Now, I thought your interaction with Dr. Garth Davis was by far the best. It was very nice. It was enjoyable. I seriously, sincerely thought he was going to come back and do it again. And that hasn't happened. Now,
No.
obviously, you can't know what's happening with the man. Maybe he's just busy, but it seems to be a trend with you. They really just don't want to talk to you. Why is that?
Because there is absolutely no way that any one of these so-called well-trained experts can pull the wool over my eyes and come up with an argument scientifically that is remotely supportable or that remotely negates what I have been saying. So, example, the Garth Davis one, the problem, in my opinion, be that humble or otherwise, with these pundits is they are all, their egos are out of whack. Okay, these guys think they know everything. They think they have the tools to combat anybody that wants to promote this ridiculous carnivorous diet, you know, because they think they've got all the science, until they actually start to talk to me and I start absolutely flame throwing their arguments and ripping out the foundations that they're based upon. And I'm like Cersei on the dragon at King's Landing, basically. And these guys are like, sorry, not Cersei, you know, the other one, Daenerys on the dragon. And these scientists are like Cersei looking out the window of King's Landing going, this isn't going so well. Well, it needs one good shot.
I would say they look more like the army of the dead, but you know,
but
that might hit too close to home for some of these vegans.
Basically, I mean, you're quite right. I can't say what is going on with Garth Davis, except what I can say is he agreed to a series of discussions over subsequent weeks on a number of topics, specific topics, on the basis of our first discussion. He agreed that publicly at that time during that discussion. It's in the video. It's on record for anyone that wants to see it. He said, hey, this is great and I want to continue these discussions. I have emailed him since that first video on no less than 5 occasions saying, Garth, let's have this discussion. Let's talk about, for example, the first topic, which was vitamin C. What's happened is in between the first discussion and now, Garth has actually bothered to do some looking into my background and looking into my level of knowledge and my understanding of the physiology here. He's looked at some of my videos where I've actually already pulled those arguments to pieces, and he has absolutely shit his pants because he knows absolutely that I will brush him off with a flick of my wrist with absolute consummate ease. He thinks he's the man for the science and he's got all the science and stuff, and he cannot afford to engage with me in a discussion publicly where we actually get to the science. The first chat was cordial and polite and nice and stuff because I wanted to have this discussion series with him. But he knows damn well where that was going and what was going to be happening. And what was going to be happening was I was going to burn his argument to the ground. He can't afford that. It destroys his credibility. He has to now ghost me. That's what goes on with that.
Well, I don't know if you saw my reaction to your talk with him, but that was the impression that I got. I kind of felt like, wow, Bart's being really nice here. Is he trying to walk him into some punches here? Like he's setting traps for the next one? I literally said you handled him with baby gloves on, perhaps because you didn't want to scare him away, but it didn't work.
I mean, at the end of the day, if Richard Burgess, for example, never wants to talk to me, that's fine. That's no skin off my nose, because everybody with half a brain cell knows that Richard Burgess is a high school dropout, is a fucking idiot. I mean, once again, I've dealt with Richard again this week and some of his ridiculous commentary that he made during his so-called debate with Spherier, for God's sake. I mean, the man is just an imbecile. So who cares? I can do that. But I was quite keen for someone who presents himself credibly, like Garth Davis does, to actually front up to a scientific discussion with an actual scientist, and so that the public will see you don't have a fucking leg to stand on here, Garth Davis. My focus is now on Michael Greger, and Klaus tells me that Michael might look at it. Again, if Michael looks at any of my videos, he'll go, no, I'm not talking to that guy. And he'll make excuses, or he's rude, or he swears too much, or whatever.
You know what that's going to look like? It's going to be a whole bunch of stuttering and brain fog and just non sequitur after non sequitur from Michael Greger. But as far as vegan gains, I understood that would have been good exposure, definitely, and a fun thing to engage in, definitely. But and I completely understand that he didn't want any of that work, because anybody with half a brain cell knows what would happen in that debate. That's not the point. But someone like Garth Davis, or even Michael Greger, or some of these so-called experts, you would think they would step up and squash a heretic such as yourself, right?
Hey, the one that really, really disappointed me was Joel Kahn. I thought he was going to come to the table with something. He was hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. My God, I really thought Joel Kahn actually had an idea about something. Wow. Anyway, so there's that one. We've got Garth Davis running away. We've got Michael Greger that may or may not front up. Any of these guys.
I hope he does, but
he won't.
If you ever talk to Garth Davis, I don't know if you're familiar with him doing a video with Fully Raw Christina, a big raw vegan YouTuber. I don't know. Anyway, he looked at her blood test. He did her blood test. And I mean, the sort of advice he gave her, I was shocked that his license wasn't suspended after that. I just don't understand how you could get away with something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that was on my list of topics to discuss with him in our series of discussions that he agreed to, and has now run away and, with brown pants. At the end of the day, I guess those of us on this side of the argument who understand that the carnivorous diet is the correct indicated diet for human beings throughout the lifespan after you're weaned off mother's milk, those of us in this camp, all we can do is take as a tacit victory the fact that none of these so-called experts will front up and sit down with me and have a scientific, not even a debate, a scientific discussion about the merits of the arguments they're putting forward. They'll talk to guys like Spherier, who has no scientific training, but they won't talk to me. Go, Christian.
Yeah. So it seems to me you're saying humans are carnivores. Now, I understand there are various ways of making the statement, various ways of classifying mammals, animals as carnivores, herbivores, what have you. How do you look at this? Where do you get this idea from, and what's the justification for this statement? Because again, this is what I agree, but playing devil's advocate, a lot of people would consider that heresy. Yeah, why are we carnivores, if indeed we are, or what are we?
Okay, so again, carnivore is a word, is a term. Herbivore is a term. Omnivore is a term. These are words that are imposed and defined by humans. They're nothing to do with the design of nature. The design of nature is that each individual species has a strategy for its own survival, for the procreation of that species, for the survival of the DNA of that species over time. And each animal has an optimal lifestyle, a lifestyle that is best for that animal, given their physiology, given their DNA, given the way they work. And humans are animals that do best when they consume a diet which is based almost entirely on the flesh of other animals. Because we have other ways that we can subsist, we can survive short-term in an emergency situation, we have the ability to live on plant matter. It won't kill us stone dead, depending on which plant it is. We can survive even for several years on plants because there aren't animals available to us. However, that's not optimal. It is deficient, and sooner or later that will cause a problem.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I agree. Do you also look at, let's say, our digestive tract or our phenotype, anything about us physically to support this theory?
I mean, what I say about humans doing best on a carnivorous diet is based on a holistic, I think, view of things. It's based on my reading of all the science that's available at this time. It's based on my significant understanding of organ systems physiology. It's based on my significant understanding of the physical structures, the way the human body is put together. It's based on my understandings of comparative physiology with other animals who have other optimal survival strategies for them. It's kind of an overarching view of all these different, I guess, observational, so-called scientific or pseudo-scientific things, but it's also based on my, I guess, viewing of anecdotes, because there is a gap in the science around the carnivorous diet at this point. We have to rely on a series of anecdotes, and let's face it, at the end of the day, data is just the plural of anecdotes collected in a controlled way. It seems to me that the inference is pretty clear. You put someone on a carnivorous diet, or they put themselves on it, to be fair. We don't put anybody anywhere. A person decides to undertake a carnivorous diet for any period of time. Their inflammatory markers go down. Their digestive function improves. Their mental health improves. Their apparent physical health improves. The quality of life improves. Their energy improves. Everything that was suboptimal about their life, health-wise, because of eating plants, is resolved. Time and time and time again.
Well, I myself, that's my strongest argument, because I have, run this experiment on myself, and I've noticed all the things that you mentioned. I appreciate the science. I'm not a scientist. I could understand anywhere between 5 to 45% of any particular study, and I do my best, definitely. So I appreciate the scientific side. But whenever I talk to lay people, this is what I bring to the table. I've noticed, as I'm sure you have, other people have as well, just a dramatic change in well-being, physical, mental, just all these things that you didn't even notice that were happening to you. All of a sudden, you achieve this, what I call a new normal, where all these things that you assumed to be normal were not. Like all these weird itches or creaking, your bones cracking, stuff like that, all kinds of stuff like that, skin issues, it all just goes away. So for me, when I hear someone saying, well, what about the studies? What about the studies? They say this, they say that. And I say, well, neither you or I really completely fully understand the studies. There's corruption, there's bias, there's human error. There are other studies that say the exact opposite thing to the studies you presented. And I always find myself frustrated talking to some of these people, because they want to completely and utterly reject my experience. And I guess it's not really a question, but I was wondering what the reasons were for why you decided to go this route, carnivory. Was it health issues, research that you did? Why did you embark upon this, and what changes did you notice in yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So I will answer that question, absolutely. But just prior to that, the one little comment I did want to throw in there that I think the lay people can probably use and put in your kit bags for when you're having these discussions with people. As a highly experienced scientist in my own right, as someone who has been involved in science for now nearly 25 years, what I can tell you with absolute confidence about science, the scientific literature, is that 95% of everything you read in the published literature is complete arse. 95% of every experimental study that has ever been published is not repeatable. Meaning, if another group of scientists picked up that study, used the exact same method again, using the same equipment again, they could not get the same results. Read into that what you will, but what I will tell you for the most usual reason for that is because 95% of all the published data is a fabrication. Science is twisted, bastardized, and fucked up beyond all recognition. You are being lied to. If you view the scientific literature as some kind of canonical text, if you deify the people in white coats that put this stuff together, you, my friend, are a fucking idiot. You have been taken in. Science will not answer this question, cannot answer this question. The only way we can get an objective truth around what this diet will do for people in the long run in their health is to run the experiment ourselves. And that's why I did it, because it made sense. And this is coming to the answer to your question, is that it made sense to me. I had been ketogenic for 20-something years. In other words, I started that long before even that was trendy, because I did not for 1 second believe that saturated fat and animal protein was bad for me and that I should base my diet on carbohydrates. It made no sense whatsoever from the ground up. And so I have always been a believer in the consumption of animal products and animal fats and the exclusion of as much of the other stuff as possible. So the ketogenic diet was where it was at. Why didn't I try a completely carnivorous diet? It never really occurred to me, to be honest. And I got my health to sort of 85, 90% right over that 20-year period eating a ketogenic diet, but never 100%. And it was kind of after I had finished my academic career in September of 2016 and I was looking for the next thing. I was going, right, I'm going to be a YouTube creator. What am I going to talk about? What's going to, what's trendy? What's going on? Who's doing what? I was interested in nutrition, so I did a search and I came across this crazy ass doctor called Baker who was eating a carnivorous diet. And I thought, okay, this makes sense.
Madman.
He's a madman, yeah. And for those that don't know, episode 110 of the Performance Outliers podcast is yours truly, and it will be coming out free to view very soon. So keep an eye out for that. But anyway, that's an aside. So I came across Baker and I thought, this is great. This makes sense. I'm going to try this. I just needed to see that there was a few other people just other than him. I came across the Petersons. And I thought, Michaela is hot and blonde, so therefore she must be right. I'm easily swayed, to be fair. Her father's not quite so hot, but he's got a PhD, so, in a completely, unrelated topic.
So wait, whoa. Hold on. So you were doing 30 bananas a day? You were doing 30 bananas a day maybe 5 years ago?
No, I've been ketogenic for about
she used to be hot and blonde.
Yep.
She was hot and blonde too. I'm referring to Freely, the banana nut job.
Banana nut job, yeah. Wow. She's a nasty piece of work.
She used to be pretty, but oh yeah.
No, she's deteriorated.
Okay, so since we're talking about exactly, that's what I wanted to talk about. Since we're talking about zombies now, do you get much into what happens to people on not just the vegan diet, but other diets? But obviously, since we're engaged in this war with these vegtards, let's talk about the vegans. I'm sure you've noticed some of the channels out there who will show you photos before and after, or before the vegan diet, 5 years on the vegan diet, and I'm sure you've seen some of the drastic differences. Do you Have you yourself noticed anything that's not really talked about, that you could almost look at a person and be not quite sure, but maybe so much sure that, okay, this is a result of so and so, blah blah blah. The thing that I'm talking about, that I'm really interested in, is how the fatty tissue above their eye, the eyelid, how it tends to just disappear and their eyes begin to sink in. I've heard certain hypotheses that maybe the brain is shrinking a little bit. Obviously, they're losing body fat. I'm wondering if it's like a cholesterol deficiency. Do you have any thoughts on any of these symptoms, or have you noticed any yourself that
Yeah.
you want to maybe
Yeah.
discuss?
All of those things, you know.
What happens to these people?
Well, you know, if there's any question whatsoever that someone on a long-term plant-based diet, whether or not their brain is affected adversely, go and have a look at the Joel Kahn videos. Go and have a look at the McDougall video. Go and have a look at a Free the Banana Skank video and see what a nasty, horrible piece of shit she's turned into. If you can stand it for more than 5 minutes, go and have a look at Richard Burgess's channel. You know, and see the man tits that he's growing, flabby bitch. You know, go and I don't know, go and have a listen to Garth Davis and the rancid, nonsensical garbage that pours out of his gob. Listen to Michael Greger if you can stand that for more than 2 seconds. You know, I think that if you're looking for anecdotes and things, I think that they're all there. You know, the writing is on the wall here. Go and have a look at my chat with Drew Morg the other day. For the last half hour or so, Klaus came on. You know, not good, boys and girls. He's not in good health. It's obvious. There are issues. And I'm not talking about the fact that it was late where he was and he was tired. Just have a look at the boy. He's pudgy. He's clearly got some self-confidence and psychology issues going on. I'm not a psychologist.
He's very young too.
Yeah, he is. He's 28 years old, and you know, the other thing is, you know, look at someone like Paul from Hench Herbivore. Okay, have a look at a picture of him now and 5 years ago. It might stun people to realize that I am, I think, 11 years older than Paul from Hench Herbivore. Okay, I'm the same age as Garth Davis. Okay, and again, you look at a picture of Garth Davis and me together, tell us we look the same age. Mm-hmm. You know, he looks a lot older than me as far as I'm concerned. And actually, have a look at a picture of Garth Davis 5 years ago and now, and see the deterioration. It is just patent. It's obvious.
So you're in your mid-50s, I'm guessing?
No, no, I'm 47.
Okay, well then you're right about Hench Herbivore's age.
Okay, I thought he was more
that
like
old. I thought you were.
All right. Yeah. All right.
No. When you said, yeah, I think he's right around your age. No, but still, yeah, he looks like he is in his 50s easily.
Yeah. And the point is, it's not really comparing him with me. It's comparing him with himself even 5 years ago. Go and have a look at the photo.
Exactly.
You know, and I could show you a photo of me.
That's more scientific.
So, you know. My appearance hasn't.
Have you noticed? Okay, well, seeing as you've been keto for 2 decades now, maybe the change wasn't as drastic as with myself, going from essentially a plant-based diet, not vegan, but maybe like 5% animal products. Crazy, going from that to complete, you know, reversal. I've noticed a bunch of changes with you because you were keto for so long. Perhaps going to carnivore, you didn't notice that many changes. But was there anything that you would say is better now that you're animal-based keto versus omnivorous keto? And what are those differences?
My mental health went from 90% at best through to you know, not good at all, actually, even on a keto diet from time to time. My mental health is now the best it's been in my entire life ever. So that's that sorted. As far as I'm concerned, that's the answer for my mental health is the carnivorous diet. I had very severe fibromyalgia between age about 40 and up until late last year when I started being completely carnivorous. That's now in complete remission, gone, no fibromyalgia to speak of. And indeed, if I do have a fibromyalgia flare-up, it usually lasts about a day or two, and usually it's because I've eaten some carbs the day before that. Every single time my body goes, nope, we've spoken about this, Charlie Brown, don't do that. What else have I noticed? I haven't dropped dead of scurvy. I've noticed that. That hasn't happened. I haven't dropped dead of a heart attack. My hair hasn't all grown back.
Do you plan on doing that?
No, I don't want to do any of those things, including growing my hair back. Bald is sexy.
Okay. Good luck with that, man. Good luck with that.
So no, yeah, I think there's probably other things as well, but I mean those are pretty major ones. Mental health, fibromyalgia, they were both very, very seriously affecting my life, and now they're not.
Yeah, I agree 100% on the mental health part. Now,
obviously,
when we say this, it kind of sounds like maybe we. Yeah, obviously, also that. But like, whenever I have a debate with the vegan coming up, I just make sure not to eat any carbs for at least a couple of days prior to the debate, because that's the only way I could sit through it without just wanting to, kill them. So I get the mental health aspect for sure. Digestion, was there like an adaptation period, or was it just smooth sailing all the way through?
As I say, that my experience is going from keto directly to carnivore. So, yeah. If anything, a couple of weeks of transition, and there were no serious issues for me. I found it very easy, physically, psychologically, physiologically. No real issues to speak of there at all. The one thing that did surprise me, and it often surprises people, is the vast reduction in the volume and frequency of shitting that you do on a carnivorous diet. Mainly because you can actually digest
all
your
this
food.
free time.
Yeah, all this free time when you'd otherwise be sitting on a can or whatever. Yeah. But no,
we have a question. Chat. I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you think of the diet cycling idea Simland? I don't watch the guy. Speaks of, I guess this guy on here, I don't know if you're familiar with this channel, but he talks about cycling from carnivore to keto to paleo and back around again.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
what is that all about? Any?
Yeah, there are some ideas that support the notion that we should change things up. In line, I guess, with the idea that for most humans, they have come from a stock of people who live away from the equator, I guess, where there are clear seasons. And the lighting situation is different at latitudes away from the equator, and it all adds up to a cycling that I was talking about, I guess, with the eating for the fall time when we're supposed to be storing fat, and then a different diet during the summer and a slightly different one during the winter, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. What it does boil down to for me is that it is not a great idea, apparently, to be in ketosis constantly. That's not good. At least for ketosis,
okay.
you cycle in and out of it. And the way,
why is this?
well, it's because your brain seems to take an increased level of ketones in your blood as a message that you're not getting what you need, and you should turn down your basal metabolic rate. You should save resources. You should, it sets your body down a path that you don't want to go. And that's backed up by
mimic seasons, basically.
Yeah, that's it. And it's backed up by the idea that the Inuit that live north of the Arctic Circle, for example, have this genetic knockdown where they are basically unable to enter ketosis to any effective degree. To which, people like Chris Masterjohn will say, oh, it's because ketosis is bad for you. No, it's because being in ketosis all the time is not a good thing. And actually, when you're in full-blown ketosis, that's only producing about 15% of your brain's energetic needs. The rest of it is still glucose, and it's still being generated from your proteins and fats. So, the whole idea that you should aim to be in ketosis and you should, that ketones are in and of themselves the goal of the ketogenic diet, it's fucking ridiculous, boys and girls. That's not the goal of the diet. The goal of the ketogenic diet for most people is to lose weight. You don't need to be in ketosis all the time to do that. In fact, you don't need to ever be in ketosis to do that. It's just silly. It's a fad. It's an idea. It's pseudoscience. So, the idea of changing things up and swapping around, it is quite a good one. What I would still maintain, though, is that there is no indication that human beings should consume any amount of plant material to speak of ever.
Yeah, someone had posted this little section, a little part of a documentary. I don't know what the full documentary was anyway. Some historian was chatting, saying how Europeans, they ate essentially some cabbage, some kind of type of leek, and other than that, it was just meat all the time. Obviously, they had some berries seasonally here and there. So what you're saying is that it might not be a bad idea to supplement, so to speak, some carbs, let's say summer, fall, or something like that.
I think that if you are in full and direct sunlight to a reasonable degree, you are avoiding non-native EMF insofar as that is possible. You are largely eating a carnivorous diet with the occasional, and I mean occasional, few berries, a few leafy green things here and there, not 7 fucking cups a day, Eric Berg, you clown. That's going to be fine. I'm not saying never ever touch a plant again in your life. That's ridiculous. And excuse me if you can hear the rain there. It's just started pissing down. So that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is your diet should be 95% upwards animal flesh, pretty much, and associated animal fat with bits and bobs of other things here and there.
Yeah, that seems to work for me. I mean, I won't lie. Sometimes I eat some more carbs because, well, my wife eats more of a standard diet, so she tends to cook, and I will cheat, so to speak. But I really definitely feel my best when I'm high fat, moderate protein, and strictly animal products. It's just everything is ticking. Everything is great. Now, one last thing I wanted to touch upon, because supplements, from what I understand, you're not a fan, but what about the argument that soils are deficient? Like, I don't believe myself that inherently an animal-based diet should be deficient in anything, versus the plant-based diet definitely inherently is. But because of our environment and deficiencies in soil, growing foods where maybe they shouldn't be grown, so on and so forth, do you think it might be prudent or sometimes indicated to supplement perhaps minerals, electrolytes, I don't think vitamin deficiencies really would be an issue, but minerals mainly. Seems like a lot of people, whether they're keto or carnivore, they're definitely looking to supplement some electrolytes. Magnesium, I'm not
Sure.
too sure about potassium. That seems like a bad idea, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, pretty much in line with your own there, Carneval. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. You know, some minerals are harmful if you have too much of them floating around. To me, an indication for supplementing a given thing is a demonstrated deficiency symptomology for that thing, which is alleviated by the supplementation of that thing. In other words, a cross-reference check. Yep, okay, now that's what the problem was, because now it's not.
It's medicine, supplements or
Yeah,
medicine.
that's right. I don't see supplementation as a preemptive act. I don't see it as something that you should undertake to prevent illnesses from occurring, because you actually might be causing one. I have never seen a single individual with bona fide identifiable deficiency symptoms of any kind on an even largely carnivorous diet. Never. I just don't accept that it's a thing, I guess.
Okay.
That said,
Cool.
you know,
Well,
some things are going to hurt you.
yeah. Like the whole vitamin C thing, I think it's a bunch of scaremongering. I went 3 months without eating any plants whatsoever, not supplementing vitamin C, and no scurvy set in. I think it should have by then. It didn't. But now that I will eat some carbs, I will like drink some orange juice here and there, so on and so forth. So, you know, to each their own. Figure your own shit out. Basically, I don't make any recommendations myself, but it might not be a bad idea. But what you're saying is, well, you should only do it if you know that you are deficient in the first place. So prophylactically, it's not a good idea to be taking supplements.
What I'm saying is
Okay,
I don't
there's a
myself.
gotcha.
Yeah.
There's a question about vitamin D during winter when we don't get enough sun. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward. Just eat meat, right? Do you eat fish, seafood? Okay, yeah,
Sure.
that's
Sure.
definitely a good source of vitamin D.
The other thing to understand about vitamin D is that the
How do
human
you?
body has capacity to store about 10 years worth. So
Okay, so if you get enough sun seasonally, you should be good anyway. Gotcha. Do you eat organs at all? Like, if you feel like it, I don't know.
I'm not a
What's
huge
your
fan.
diet?
Yeah, I'm not a
Okay,
huge fan of
what do
organs.
you eat?
Mainly it's muscle meat and associated fat, connective tissue and stuff that's with that, skin, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
of various animals, mostly ruminants, but there is probably a fair proportion of chicken in there, and there's probably quite a bit of pork as well, but the basis is beef and lamb, New Zealand beef and lamb. Yeah.
Sounds delicious. Yeah, pork gets a bad name, but me personally, I do great with pork. It's fine for me. Some people have weird reactions, so it is what it is. And seafood, eggs. I know you're not a fan of dairy. What about eggs?
Yeah, seafood and eggs. I have some egg. I'll have an omelette now and then. When Pim makes patties, she'll do that with egg, like meat burgers, I should say. What they call, we call them patties. They're called burgers in the other parts of the world.
Burgers,
Um,
yeah.
so she'll use egg for that. She sneaks eggs in lots of places because she knows I don't like. I'm not a fan per se, and eggs are a great source of nutrition. So I'm glad that she does that. Yep. So dairy, not a fan, although I do consume quite a bit of cream because I also drink a lot of coffee, and I have cream in my coffee, basically. That's carnivorous coffee, of course. Not plant-based coffee. Yeah.
What do you think? Where do you stand as far as coffee? Some people say bad, some people say good. What's your take on it?
I say
Unbiased take.
Yeah, I say don't stand between me and the coffee. It won't end well for you.
Okay.
No, look, coffee in a certain amount can be hormetic. The amount of coffee I drink is way, way above that level. It's probably unhealthy. I need to get that under control, and I will do at some point. But for now, just don't stand between me and the coffee jar.
Gotcha. I could relate. Anyway, we've been on for almost 2 hours now.
Awesome.
Did you want to contribute anything else? Anything else you want to say? If not, maybe we could wrap it up.
Just I want to thank you very much for having me on. As I say, I've been looking forward to it for many, many months. I've wanted to talk to you. You are one of my favorite YouTubers. I love the way that you dismantle folks in a cool, calm, and collected way without using too many emotive turns of phrase, shall we say. I have really enjoyed talking to you today. I hope that I have been able to shed some light on a few things for a few people that may not have had a full understanding of those things prior to today. If nothing else,
Bart, I just wanted to say thank you first and foremost, and secondly, I'm very much glad that someone like you appeared on the scene, because there's a lot of us lay people, and I think it's good to see someone who actually can look at the science and tell us things that us normal people, regular people, could never extract from the literature. So it's definitely good to have you on our side, and with all the douchebaggery and tomfoolery and whatever the hell you want to call it, all the mind brainwashing that's going on the vegan side, it's good to have someone like yourself on our side, and definitely putting fear in all these quacks. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. Yep. So if nothing else, take the message from me today as a scientist that 95% of everything that you will read in science is fucking nonsense.
Right on, Bart. Well, thank you again for coming on, and we should definitely schedule something at a later date when we have some more trash to talk about, vegans or whatever it may be. So once again, thank you for coming on. I'm glad we were able to finally schedule this. I look forward to speaking with you at a later date. And thanks to all of you guys for showing up. Everybody have a good night. You too, Bart.
Hello, boys and girls.
Later, guys.